right, we are here with Josh Roberson, senior data analyst with the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M. So, Josh, can you first go into what is the Real Estate Center and what do you do for them?
So the Texas A&M Real Estate Center, we basically, the short story is we provide Texans with, data and analysis to make better real estate decisions. We cover everything from residential to commercial real estate. And we've been very, very busy this past few months. So with everything going on, but we cover, housing market, like I said, the real estate market, as well as the economy and just kind of how those two link, and as well as demographics. So, but yeah, it's a public resource for everyone. So
the past few months have been crazy. So you wrote your article. This is why I reached out to you. The anatomy of a pandemic, assessing the housing market, damage and recovery. Give me kind of the general 50,000 foot view of the effects of COVID on the real estate market in Texas.
Yeah, I think. Where do I begin with that? I think just kind of from the outset, from the outset.
There's a lot of ways you can go.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go, but I think from the outset, the biggest thing was just the velocity and the magnitude by which everything changed, including real estate. Normally, these sort of things take a little bit longer to kind of develop, but basically, it's one day is fine, and the next day we're all shut down. And while the housing market, slowed down really everywhere before state official mandates were shut down. I remember we were on spring break when we started seeing events kind of start to get canceled, and then just kind of mentally people were just kind of like, stepping back some, and just, that's when you started seeing activity fall really everywhere. So, but it really, if you think about it, it just happened super quick. I mean, at the time it seemed like it was taking forever, but I mean, in the grand scale of things, you look at recessions, it normally takes a little bit longer to like get to the worst. And I mean, you look at those initial numbers for like unemployment and a lot of these other economic figures. I mean, it was, just one data point and then the next data point, just boom. So that is probably one of the biggest key differences with, other recessions or other.
Well, I know other events like this. I know, like, even when it first started, so especially March, it was kind of like, obviously you get February's data that's kind of pre-lockdown, and then even during March, people are like, there was a sense that, the unemployment and all these other indicators was a gigantic shift, but I don't think everyone knew about it yet. But then in March, I know in the real estate world, so my wife's a real estate agent, I mean, it just went from a lot to nothing, just really, really quick. Yeah. And was that felt just statewide, kind of everywhere? Was it mainly in pockets? We're in the Lake Travis area of Austin, but was that just statewide or mainly in pockets?
I mean, in a large sense, I mean, the economy in general is statewide. I mean, everywhere, because the same mandates were everywhere. Now, you can make an argument that there's different feels, in urban versus rural, and that's certainly been a thing. But, you look at the economic numbers, I mean, it's been everywhere. So, and it's all because of the common denominator, especially, like I said, the late March, early April, because there was so much uncertainty. I mean, there was so many rumors and fears about what exactly we're dealing with. The fact that we did have a lockdown just signaled just the severity of it. And I don't know if people really knew what to do. So there was some lingering, like, we did see some sales kind of continue off, into late March, early April, but we think that had more to do with just like those were deals that were too close to the finish line to really, pull back.
Stop at that point, yeah.
Right. It wasn't really signaling what was going on at the moment. It was really signaling what was going on just, immediately before. But no, I mean, it was everywhere. It wasn't just regional. So.
And then all of a sudden, it kind of seems to come roaring back. Like, what time frame did that happen, and what do you think triggered that?
Yeah, I mean, I think really confidently you could say that June is when things kind of start roaring back. You see the pending listings. We weren't sure if it was going to be right out the gate in May, because that's when I guess when things started to kind of open up some. But I think there's just still a lot of uncertainty. And then also, you think about just, I'm not an not a real estate agent. It's been a while since I've been close to the transaction like that, but you just hear anecdotal stories, and I'm sure you can probably fill in some of this. But just having the agent, like that process, having to reinvent itself. Going, it's a very face-to-face industry. You go shop for a home, you go walk about it, and now you have to make it contactless. Basically, I mean, so there's gonna be maybe that's why I didn't pick up some until June, or at least part of it is that the industry had to kind of reinvent itself. The whole pipeline, just not only showing homes and negotiating deals, but also title closings, the mortgage industry. You think about the mortgage industry, what kind of turmoil they were in. I mean, you had rates kind of go all over the place for a little bit before they settled
Sure.
downwards. They were probably trying to plan for possible layoffs, and now it's like, oh no, we need everyone back to originate mortgages. I mean, there's just so much chaos. So, but the end result is that I would say June is when you really started seeing pending numbers kind of climb, and then July and August was just a boom period. And in fact, it's crazy to think that what we lost in activity and sales from April, a lot of places for the most part made up for it. Plus, come the end of September, I mean, year-to-date sales as September is in a better position this year than last year, and so it's really just a matter of how long kind of will this last. We'll have the data for that available for everyone in next coming weeks, but yeah, I mean, it more than made up for for April. So
It's funny. I've heard a lot of brokerages have actually done better this year through this point in the year than they did all of last year.
I know,
with 2 months still to go, and
it's late in the season. I mean, you still like housing starts. I mean, this is late in the season for buying a home, and it's still, doesn't show much sign of slowing down for the most part.
no, not at all. And to go back to something you said, about how agents kind of had to change how they were doing things. It was interesting because when agents kind of first started getting back into showings and stuff like that, it was all these virtual kind of Zoom showings. And, I think at first buyers were like, well, I'm not going to buy a house just with an agent walking out the camera. But then I'll tell you, it became routine. And from my wife's perspective as a real estate agent, it still is routine. And she's showing, especially out of state people, she's showing houses like by walking around with her camera, and people are making offers based on that. You never would have seen that this time last year.
That's nuts. Well, yeah, it's crazy to think also that, I don't think we could have done nearly what we're doing now had this happened 10 years ago, just because the technology that's available now, the bandwidth, the availability, the familiarity with things like Zoom and Google Hangout. I can't imagine what this would have looked like 10 years ago.
It would not have likely has looked as good. So let's, and I'm trying to think of where I want to go first with this because they're tied, but the move from urban centers to suburban, and then I want to also ask about rural areas, and then the influx of out-of-staters into Texas and how that's affecting things. So I'll let you decide where you want to go first.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly been a lot of buzz about, I mean, some people call it urban flight. We try to be careful with that because, I think what happens is people see what happens in like New York or San Francisco, and they may automatically think that's happening here.
Extrapolate.
Those are very, very unique cases. There certainly is. So again, if you look at, listing activity, for example, and it's, I didn't get a chance to look up the latest, but at the time when I wrote the article, basically everywhere listings was down this year compared to last year. But for whatever reason in the Austin, particularly Travis County, the listings in kind of the 200 and below, maybe 250 and below, was even lower, compared. So instead of just everything kind of going down, it was everything went down, and then I don't know if you can see this. I'm not. The affordable range just didn't come online, and I think that that's an important part of the whole, urban versus suburban kind of discussion because you look at Comal County, for example. I have family that live in New Braunfels, and
Sure.
you look at what's going on there because of just the general shortage of affordable homes in general. I mean that's been or homes in general really. That's been a major growth area. It's also strategically located between Austin and San Antonio.
San Antonio.
That's where like a lot of the growth was happening anyways. And so what I fear people may be doing is that, you know, you have this situation where listings in the core counties, because it's not just Travis County, it's also like Dallas County and Harris County, the listings are exceptionally down. And then you compare that to a growth area anyways, and then they extrapolate that, well, everyone's just moving to the city. Keep in mind, there's just I mean, I'm not doubting that that's happening, but at the same time, if you're going to buy a home, where are the homes you could buy anyway? You know,
Right.
um, and so I think sometimes it could be just be something where like it just accelerated an existing trend. It'll be interesting to see what the next early next year brings. Will listings start coming back? They see home prices in position where they're at now. I think a lot of people are maybe waiting to see if home prices were going to continue to go up because there's so much chaos. I mean, it's hard to tell. But I mean, third quarter, we have a home price index, CoreLogic, the Case-Shiller home price index. FHFA also has one, and they're all pointing that home prices are growing quite a bit. Now, it's a
Yeah.
very specific subset, and it's also again you have the supply and demand situation. I don't think people really expected that. Yes, immediately demand fell because of the economic situation, but supply fell quite a bit. Supply had kept the same and demand fell, we'd be in a much different situation. So I think people were just
Right.
wanting to see where things were going before deciding to sell a home, and maybe people start listing. I don't know, or they could all be refinancing because rates are favorable for that too. So
Yeah, and then you wouldn't have to sell. I definitely don't think in Austin, which I'm familiar with, I don't think in downtown Austin there's necessarily like a bunch of flooded inventory of cheap homes. I think people just saying I'm just not going to sell
right,
and I'll
right.
wait this out.
Well, especially Austin. I mean, a lot of people had to be very patient to find their home in Austin. Period. I mean, I don't know if Austin. You think of all the places to be during the pandemic. I mean, Austin is you got the hill country. That's gorgeous area. So and
Sure.
they have parks and they have all these amenities. So I'm not really sure people would be rushing uh, uh, to move there. I think they're just hunkering down, really. So
Well, I think Austin can be distinguished from kind of the outlying areas because we're by Lake Travis, and I mean, there's just a gigantic influx. So people are definitely selling because they're just getting way higher prices than they would have 6 months ago in my neighborhood anyway. And there's a ton of people moving in. But I haven't noticed like people coming from say downtown Austin who are moving out to Lake Travis. It's not bad. It's definitely people moving from outside of town. Is there any so far evidence that there is increased activity in rural areas? Say, take away the four major metros. A big story has been people moving from major metropolitan areas to more rural areas where they have more space and can kind of hunker down in the event there was another lockdown, especially wealthier real estate home buyers. Is there any evidence of that in Texas?
if you look at housing sales, I mean, depends on what you define on rural. I mean, if it gets really rural, I mean, you look at the difference between 10 home sales to 12 home sales is a 20% increase. People are looking way too much into that. So when you get into the smaller areas, it's hard to separate the noise from a trend. But there are some areas, for example, I think it's Cedar Creek Reservoir it's near Athens, kind of on the southeast of. I'm thinking of like Gun Barrel City and
yeah, sure.
And I think it's Ballbank. My wife's going to kill me. She's from that area. She always corrects me how to pronounce it. But anyway, I haven't looked in the past couple of months, but kind of in that June area, I did see that there was a lot of activity, a big activity spike there. I think also Rockport was the same way on the coast. And so some of those areas I call like resort areas. Yes, you did see an influx of activity. I don't know where they're at year to date now. So yes, you do see some of that, but other areas, like again, kind of depends on how you define rural. it's kind of too hard to separate the noise from an actual trend. So
Sure.
anecdotally, we have heard that there has been an increase in land sales. Um, Dr. Gilliland, he knows more about that than me. I just kind of hear through osmosis through the meetings. But so yeah, there has been just here and there. But in terms of housing market, those two kind of stuck out to me. And I think Brenham as well. But Brenham's also kind of in
That
that
would make sense.
right. I mean, we kind of call Brenham the Houston Hampton. So it's
You can have to.
that and
That
uh, Waller County, I think. I forget. But anyway, that kind of corridor 290. I mean, that's a lot of Houston influx. So,
Sure. It wouldn't surprise me if the Woodlands is seeing some influx as well
right. Yeah, I've been
in
looking at things
Houston.
from kind of a broader sense because really the same influencers are going on everywhere. So occasionally I'll look into a specific market, but for the most part, the story's kind of the same everywhere. So
Let me ask you this though. So the general economy has kind of come back, but oil is kind of, you
yeah.
know, fell off a cliff. What's been the effects of that on Texas as a whole? Is it limited to kind of the Permian Basin? Are we seeing those effects elsewhere?
You definitely see those effects elsewhere. I mean, you got the Permian, you have areas like Victoria, Beaumont, of course, Houston, and yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to separate, the overall pandemic from that. I mean, we just kind of consider it as a double whammy. It's that double impact. Um, so yeah, I mean, you do see it more than just the obvious places. So.
Okay. What about so I hear all the time, and full disclosure, I'm a former Californian, but we hear all the time about the influx from, California, New York, Chicago. How's that especially affect from a real estate perspective? Is that driving up prices in certain areas?
Anecdotally, we hear that. We actually won't get the data from the Census Bureau for probably a year. Unfortunately, the field of economics, we're often dealing with lagged data. And so when we're right in the midst of things, we won't get the official number till later. But I mean, if you look at, for example, I wrote a blog piece about a year ago about kind of the influx of Californians. I believe it was 2018. It was shortly after the tax bill where they got rid of the SALT deductions. We
Right.
saw, if any given year we get a net, 20,000 Californians, that the year following was 50,000. And so I definitely think it's a possibility. I think, again, I think a lot of it is people may chase, um, you know, Texas for the size economy still has a very affordable housing market. I know
Sure.
for native Texans, we're really annoyed at the fact that home prices are going up compared to what we're used to. But you compare that to the coast, Texas is still very affordable. So, and we don't really know at this point how things, Texas benefited in a great way after the Great Recession in the sense that our economy, we were kind of on an upward trajectory, and we benefited greatly from the fact that we had strong employment numbers, and that kind of set us off for just kind of a decade of growth. It's still kind of early to say kind of how we're going to fare this time around because the nature of the oil industry is different, and so we don't want to take that for granted. So we'll need to know a little bit more to kind of see where that's going. But I mean, in general, Texas is still an affordable market, and depending on how tax situations fare and how employment situations fare, and Texas is still a employer-friendly state in general. So I mean,
Sure.
that's still a thing. But I think we're in a good position. But I mean, it's will it be the same magnitude as 10 years ago? I don't really know.
Well, you bring up a good point about affordability because I'll tell you, like we lived in San Diego, and in San Diego County, I mean, there's no way would find a house when we left, and this was 2017 for under about 450,000. That would be like say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And in the Austin market, I mean, within a 30-minute drive, there's thousands of houses for that price. So it is just a big difference. And now with telecommuting, I wonder how this is going to affect the telecommuting with some of these smaller markets like your Wacos, your
Yeah.
even your more resort markets, your Port A's and stuff like that, because people can truly like move from anywhere and live in and kind of live wherever they want.
Yeah. Just one more thing to piggyback off that previous question is that, we also had a much higher inventory of homes 10 years ago, and we're kind of scraping the bottom, in terms of what's available now. What we've seen over the past 10 years is inventories in general decreasing, but then also in general, what they call housing tenure. People are staying in their homes even longer. So we don't have that deep pool of, homes available. What I'm trying to say is that at some point we need more units to come online. And
do you think there's going to be a boom in terms of builders, building here to kind of accommodate that need?
I could certainly see that. The economics have to work out. In some of these, denser areas, land cost is still very much a factor, especially in the Austin area. That's,
Sure.
And it's not just, number of units, period, but what types of homes are being built. 10 years ago, you had a much wider distribution of homes in terms of square footage being built. But what we found is that, as the, so it took a while for construction numbers to get back up, but the distribution of homes got narrower and narrower to this, technically it's around, 2,000 square feet, give or take, which has always been, a key seller. So it's the market's basically focusing on it's not the lowest end of the market, it's not the super highest end of the market. It's
sure.
Here, and so it's not just number of units, but then also the distribution of units as well. And it's interesting because we're also seeing shortages not only in homes for sale, but we're also seeing shortages of homes for rent too. And
right.
It's not just the homes for sale aspect. I'm talking about single family homes for rent, multifamily homes. That's kind of a different story. But
so to go back on what you were just saying there, are you seeing the average size of the home increase, and is that people trying to is that builders trying to target that higher end market to the exclusion of kind of the lower income need?
In general, over the past 10 years, I think 2019 it reversed some. I saw that. I think NAHB posted that on their blog. I haven't looked for the Texas region. The data just came out. It's the Census Bureau survey of construction. I just haven't had a chance to look for our region.
Sure.
But nationally, it did retreat. So it did get a little smaller. But I wouldn't be able to say for what's going on right this moment. I just kind of rely on those in the industry to tell me. I just see the number of units, and the building permit data just has the value, but I don't have the size. So
what's going on in the commercial world? We've talked a lot about residential. People are talking about the office becoming obsolete. Have you seen any trends enough to speak on, and since the pandemic started, about the commercial market?
Limited. Most of my focus is on the residential market. We have the most data, and that's where my focus is. But I start with you hear a lot about like hospitality and retail. Obviously they've had a very rough year, to say the least. Occupancy for hotel is it's getting better, but the thing is with that is even if you have vacationers come back, how long is it going to take for the business travelers to come back? And that's a big part of that business. Retail, you see grocery shopping is still above average.
Sure.
But everything else is still very much recovering. And then in terms of office, I don't know if I have my finger down on what's going on. I know in general, but I don't have numbers for you. A big question will be, the impact of remote work. And I think the number for those who did remote work beforehand was maybe about 8%. That's the number that's in my head. And I think I read that, at least during the summer, it went up to about 40%.
Wow.
I don't think that I don't think anyone's thinking that it's going to stay anywhere near that. I think maybe you might get into the teens because you know you think about not every job can be done remotely, and then many jobs. I mean, teaching, for example, it could be technically done remotely, but it's not really ideal. Uh,
No.
and so I think a lot of people are doing it for now. And then, of course, you have the whole argument of team building dynamics, human capital, all those aspects. Some jobs, I mean, I'm more on the nerdier side of things, and I think in academia in general, it was already trending like more research, being done remotely, not anywhere at the scale of like 40%, but it kind of lends itself to you just kind of do your own work, and I think a lot of software developers are kind of the same way. I used to do that some as well, and those kind of jobs are conducive. I'm sure there's others like financial
What
services.
I worry about for especially like younger workers is the lack of kind of being seen at work. So this goes along with the social aspect, but it's tough to get a pulse on who's really producing and who's really doing a good job, because you're relying on kind of email and chat messages and phone calls to try and figure that out. So that's why I kind of like you. I don't think it'll stay anywhere near 40. I think it'll be higher than 8%, but I think it'll retreat towards
Yeah,
that
it's higher
eventually.
than normal. But again, I think that might just be an accelerating process to like it was heading that way already.
Anyway,
Because I mean, a lot of these core centers. I mean, you look at again, we're going to look at the extreme, San Francisco. I mean, cost of living is just out the roof. Office space is just crazy, and so when you have this alternative option, um, then I think a lot of companies will look into it. But then also, kind of going back to the urban to suburban type thing, I've heard that some companies are looking at maybe work from home 1 to 2 days, and then the remaining days they'll come to the office, and that's where
we're actually looking at making it part of, how you would get X number of days of PTO per year. We're thinking of like X number of days of work from home per year. So, because some people, they may want to do, hey, every Friday I work from home. Some people may say, I don't really want to work from the office, but I want to work 2 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks in the winter, so we can go somewhere and stay. So I think it'll be interesting, and companies are going to be willing to be a little more flexible, with regards to that.
Well, in some ways, I mean, you could position it as a perk because, for me, I come in, I'll come in on a Friday and I'll leave at lunch, and I feel like I'm about to step into a 3-day week, even though I'm going home to work. There's something mental,
Right.
and in some jobs, I've heard people say that, they love being around coworkers, they love, just be, kind of that sense of being. But at the same time, that can work the other way if you have constant interruptions. If you're trying to focus on something and you remove that, and you just I've heard that some as well. So it can kind of go both ways. Sometimes it's nice being home where you don't have as many disruptions. Someone coming to your door. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I think I don't know. I think it'll take time to kind of sort that one out. So
For sure. I want to switch gears to lending, and I wish I'd asked this when we were talking more about residential, so I'll go back to it. It seems to me like, reading your article, that there wasn't maybe as much of there weren't as many homeowners getting in trouble with their mortgages as I think maybe we would have thought at the beginning of the pandemic. Am I reading that right?
yeah, I mean that was one of the thoughts. That people were going into, for example, the mortgage forbearance as kind of a defense mechanism, because I mean it's gradually been going down, and for this past month it's kind of plateaued at I think 3 million. But really the requirements to go into the forbearance, I believe, was simply just contacting your lender. I don't think there was.
I had a few people who did it, and they said it was as easy as they called their lender and said, I need forbearance. They said, yeah, 3 months, and call us back at the end and let us know if you need more.
Yeah, I mean, I originated mortgages during the 2007 2008 bust, and there was a little bit there was more of an involved process. It was the HARP loans at the time. It was,
Yeah.
you can refinance your loans, or restructure the loans, and that was basically re-originating. That was the whole process. So I think the steps to do the forbearance were, it was pretty low. Uh, like you said, is just contact your lender. So, and why not? I mean, if again, we didn't know what we know now. I mean, we thought the world was ending. So I know I contacted my lender at least to have that I didn't do mortgage forbearance, but um, my wife, she's a physical therapist, and we thought that she would just be home for the whole remainder of the year. She can't
Right.
work from home doing that. Technically, she could, but it's not the same.
A little more difficult.
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult. Yeah, they don't call them physical therapists for nothing. So, anyway, I mean, even I had that conversation, and they made it sound like, yeah, when you really pull the trigger, just let's do it. And I never did, because we ended up doing fine. But yeah, so that was.
I think one of the differences maybe this time around compared to 2007, 2008, and then 2009, that lasted a long time. Now that I sit there and think about it, I think, back then a big difference was with those zero down mortgages, homeowners didn't have as much skin in the game as today. I mean, I think now, like, every lender is requiring you put 20% down for the most part. Maybe you get by with 10%. And when you've got that much equity, and you realize you could get foreclosed on and lose a lot of your equity, I think a lot of more people had the incentive to sit there and go, how can I work this out if possible?
Well, yeah, and that does make a big difference. I mean, the banking industry in general is in a much different shape now, better capitalized, and people harped about how lending requirements got harder in late May, early June, but really, relatively speaking, I mean, the biggest change happened after the Great Recession. So mortgage requirements got tougher in the sense that I think they held at that 680 minimum credit score, and they took certain products off the table, like jumbo loans. I think that basically got pushed to
Sure.
private label stuff. But for the most part, I mean, it wasn't a night and day difference. I think most of the loans, 10 to 20% down. That's kind of been the norm for a while. So I think the big thing is just we're just trying to figure out. I mean, you have all these sales, and I think that the sense that I get is that we really kind of took for granted just the demographics heading into just the selling season, the summer selling season. Taking for granted just how many older millennial households who are starting to get further in their careers. You drop the rate, and it's like a dinner bell. It's like, this is your chance, because rates aren't going to get any lower. I mean, they normally have that constant spread above the 10-year, and you're bottomed out. So it's like, it's now or never. So, and
for sure. And if anyone was ever thinking about it, that was the time.
Well, and then we get the sense that people get caught up on like the shape of the economic recovery, V, U, L, all this stuff. And I think one that's starting to stick is the K-shape economy. There's a lot of people, of course, that they're having a really tough go of it, financially. And then there's others where it seems like they got their stimulus check and they just threw it in the savings account, or they spent it. I mean, there's definitely that big difference, and so.
That's why I wonder how much of the real estate world is just truly inflation. There's trillions and trillions of dollars of stimulus going out from the Fed. Traditionally, that has to go somewhere.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big things for this upcoming year is, we've been under the kind of the umbrella, protective umbrella of government intervention. What are things going to look like once you take, some of these protections away? Mortgage forbearance, or with renters. I mean, if there's no kind of rental assistance or anything, what's that going to look at? You look at the household pulse survey from the Census Bureau, and you look at the difference in sentiments between homeowners and renters. It's night and day. A lot of it has to do based on their income levels, which is pretty intuitive. But, as a group, I mean, homeowners in general don't really fear, homeowners with mortgages, that is, don't really fear, either foreclosure or missing a payment, whereas renters, it's a much different story.
So that kind of goes back to that K-shaped recovery. I'd never heard that before, but that makes sense. The renters would fit into the bottom angle of the K, and the homeowners would fit into the top angle, and that's probably a big dichotomy that's going through all of Texas right now.
Yeah, and that's actually where I'm going to be spending a lot of my attention. I mean, of course, I'll continue to do the housing market, but but the rental side of things, that there's certainly possibility for systemic risks there. So, if tenants aren't able to pay, and what happens to the landlords? Are they going to be able to cover the cost or find new renters? That's something we'll definitely be spending more time on.
It's interesting because personally we have we have 3 rentals all in the Kyle and Buda area, and it's like we worked with a couple tenants to push some stuff off into future months, but it ended up fine. But I could have seen that going a lot worse.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting. You're right. Like once stimulus is up, what's going to happen there? What I think tenants got to be worried about is if you do, once evictions come back, if you do get evicted, how's that going to affect your ability to get a new place?
Yeah, and that could definitely spiral out of control pretty quickly, because you're working, and then something that's completely out of your control, you're not able to make your rent payment anymore. So and then once you have that on your record, same with with some of the mortgage forbearance. People did mortgage forbearance, and then they stopped making payments for the mortgage, because that, I guess, was the point of it. But the industry was kind of sorting itself out, and people got dinged on their credit report because nobody knew the ramifications.
Well, because you didn't make a payment. Yeah. Like that's the downside of all this stuff.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. And I think the other thing is I hope we're in a lot less of a risk for a total shutdown in Texas again. It seems like the appetite for that has kind of gone away. And that would really affect things. I mean, if we did another shutdown in Texas, that's a major problem. And I don't think it's as much of a risk as it was when this all, because obviously we did it, so it was a big risk when it all started. But I think a lot of that risk has gone away, I hope.
Yeah, no, I agree. So,
well, good. Anything else on your mind before we end this, Josh?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of covered kind of a wide range of topics. So I think
it was good stuff, man. I know a lot of people in my neighborhood and beyond are real anxious and interested in general about real estate and the market in Texas, and for certain markets why it shot up so much. So I think you gave a lot of insight there, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And if any of your listeners can think of something or anecdotal story, again, I'm not at the transaction level. You mentioned your spouse is a realtor. I mean, she wants to fill in some of those details. I just kind of read what's in the news, in terms of kind of the ground level operations. But if there's any other questions or anything to add on, just let me know.
How do people get in touch with you?
So you can go on the recenter.tamu.edu on the staff listing. You'll find my email, my phone number. You can contact me there. So.
And I got it. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So. All right, man. Really appreciate it, Josh. Thanks so much.
All right, great. It's a pleasure.